Hi, this is City Scrapper. Today I'm here to share with you how I make embellishments for my scrapbooking layouts using molds and using modeling material. The first thing I wanted to show you are some different molds that are available. The first type of mold that I came across were these molds. I got these on eBay. There are tons of different molds available. Pretty much anything that you're looking for, they have a mold for. They are nice because they're tiny. Usually the items that they make are tiny and they're perfect for scrapbooking pages because they're nice and small. And these are very pliable molds. You could really move those around, which makes them good for popping out the items after you make them. Another type of mold, which is my favorite kind, are Prima molds. Prima makes some beautiful molds for paper crafters, and I use these. I would say I use these probably the most. Uh, I'm just going to show you some of the ones that I have, and I bought these over a long period of time. This is one of my recent ones that I bought. This one I use a lot, and this is another recent one that I bought, the roses. There's medallions and bigger medallions. These flourishes are something that I've used on several pages. So they have quite a lot available, and these are photo corners. But you really just need one mold to get started. So you don't have to have all of these, just need one. Another type of mold you could use are there's plastic ice trays that are molded into shapes. This was my husband used this to make ice cubes, and then he thought, oh, you could use that with your clay. So those are also something you could be on the lookout for. And the candy making aisle or cake decorating aisle of Joann and Michael's has a lot of Wilton and some other brand molds that you could also use for your paper clay. And I like these as well. And I just purchased these recently and they were very reasonable with a coupon. The final way that I got molds is I made some myself. I watched some YouTube videos about how to make them, and they're not as pretty as the others, but they worked out pretty well. I'm going to show you a layout that has this shell on it later on. And they're, like I said, you could look on YouTube to learn how to make them, but I'm just going to give you a quick summary. So basically, I purchased this 100% silicone from Home Depot or Lowe's, and you put it into some kind of container and mix it with cornstarch. And once you mix those two things together, it makes kind of a clay. And when it reaches a certain consistency, you can press in items. So for example, I purchased these items at a flea market, and I only had one of some of them. So I bought them to put on scrapbook pages, but then I felt bad using them because I didn't have another one. So when I saw the option to make a mold out of it, I thought, oh, this is perfect. So I made a couple of those. This one has a little hole in it over here, which isn't really a problem because I'm using it for paper clay. But if you're using it with epoxy, then that would be a problem. But I haven't used epoxy yet. Just thought I would show you. I have these two items. This is clear epoxy, and this is liquid plastic. I believe this one comes out clear. This one comes out white. This is going to be my next experiment, and I can't tell you anything about it now because I haven't done it yet, but I do know that you can also use these in the molds that you buy. And I believe this one, these items you would probably paint, and then with the epoxy you can color the epoxy and make it different colors. The clay that I use is called Creative Paper Clay. I get this from Michael's. It's probably about $14 to $15, but I always make sure I get everything with a coupon just because of the markup on items. So this is a lot. You get 16 ounces. This will fill many molds. And if you don't use all of it at one time, it preserves very well. Just have to put it in a plastic bag and make sure it's airtight, and it stays soft for a very long time. Another option is to fill your molds with Fimo or Sculpey, and that doesn't air dry. That is I guess you'd call it a clay or a compound, that you would take it out of the molds as soon as you had it pressed into the mold the way you liked it. You could take it out, make sure it was flat on a cookie sheet, and then you could bake it, and then you wouldn't have to wait for it to dry. And I have done that before. I used a Sculpey souffle, I think it was called, and it worked out just fine. And the items took the paint very well, so I was happy with that as well. This for me is just a little bit easier because it comes in a larger package and I can get a lot more done at once. Okay, so I'm going to use my modeling material and I'm going to put it into these two molds. And I picked a small one, small of the more squishy ones, and then I picked one of the Prima molds, which is a little harder, that has a larger image. And like I said, this is pretty self-explanatory, but I'm just going to show you, what I've learned. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to start with this little one. So basically what I do, and this is just how I've learned to do it, is I take the clay and I squish a layer into the mold, making sure that I push down hard so that I will get the clay into all the little grooves that are in the mold. Once I do that and I feel confident that I've gotten the clay into all the little folds in the mold, I just put a little bit more in there, and then I just slightly go around the edge with my finger just to see if there's any overlap. It's not a big deal if there are any little pieces that stick out afterwards. You can just get rid of those with even with your fingernail, or with any little tool, a pair of scissors. They come off very easily, but I like them to look neat when they're done if possible. So I just push it in a little tiny bit. If I push it in too much, you just squish it out again. It's not a big deal. So again, just squishing it in. And some of them have more areas to cover or more dimension than others. So some, really won't take as long to squish it in, but I do like to give it a little bit of force at this point. Just to make sure that when I pull it out, it's perfectly formed. So I'm not gonna make you sit here and watch me doing the same thing with all of them, but that's what I'm gonna do for all of them. And it really, you could see that it doesn't take a long time to fill these in, and within a couple of days, I'll have a lot of really nice embellishments to paint. So I'm just gonna put this one aside for now, and I'm gonna show you the Prima one. So, of course, this Prima one has a much bigger mold, and there's less detailed. It's detailed, but because it's larger and because it's just a different, it's representing something different, there aren't as many grooves and things as there would be in, for example, the seashells that I just did. So, but still, I do the same thing. I squish it into all the areas. And as I mentioned before, you don't have to fill it all the way up to the top. And I definitely don't recommend overfilling it, because then it could, first of all, you're using extra clay that you don't really need to use. And then you could also find that it rocks a little bit if you put it on your page, because it's not totally flat. If it like bumps up here, you can always sand that down again. There's very little that can't be fixed. If something breaks as you're taking it out of a mold, you can glue it back together on your page. There's very, very few times I had to throw anything away. It's very fixable, and because you're putting paint over it, you can hide a lot of things with the paint. So just pushing it down there, making sure I get it all the way in. This clay is really nice and soft. I bought some Prima clay that was basically the same type of clay, And it really wasn't soft, although I'm not sure, it might have just been older clay. I got it from Michael's when I was purchasing a lot of their, they had these little jarred paints that I bought a whole bunch of, and they had the clay there as well. And I ended up not being able to use the clay. It was too hard. It was probably dried out. But anyway, I've been very happy with this particular clay. But like I said, I'm sure there's many others out there. If you have something else, try it out. Use what you have. Okay, so that's how I fill in my molds. So I'm going to fill in a bunch, and then I'll be back to show you how I remove them from the molds and then how I paint them. After I filmed filling up the molds, I put these aside, and these were the only molds that I forgot to fill all the way. But I'm still going to use them to show you how to remove your pieces from your molds. So just two quick pieces of advice. The first is make sure that you let your clay dry thoroughly. I usually wait about 3 days, sometimes more if the pieces are bigger. They look like they're dry a lot sooner than that, but if you take them out too soon, they warp. And the bigger the piece, the more they warp, and the more easily they'll warp. So I try to leave larger pieces in for as long as possible. You can see in the back whether or not they're fully dry. There'll be a different color in the middle if they're not totally dry, but I just like to leave them in a long time. The first time I made them, I was so excited to take them out, and then the bigger pieces warped a lot. So I've learned to leave them in the mold as long as possible. The next thing that I would say is when you're removing them, you want to keep the piece flat and you want to bend the mold around it so that the piece won't break. So you have to be very careful that it comes away. If you leave them in a long time, it'll easily come away, and your piece will be totally dry and turn out very nice. The little pieces are even easier, and you can just give a little shove behind the mold and they just kind of pop out. And they're all ready to paint when they pop out. You don't have to gesso them. You could gesso them, but I haven't found that necessary. I just go right into painting them. Okay, so now all of the items have been removed from the mold and all the pieces look really good. I don't think I have a preference as far as how well the pieces come out based on the mold brands that I use. I think they all look really nice. The only thing that I can caution you about is something like this that's long and skinny. It does warp a little bit, but if I paint this and I glue it down to my page using this, it's called Matte Super Heavy Gel. This one's from Liquitex. A lot of different companies make that. And I brush that underneath and hold it down. It will stay flat on my page. That's because this one's very thin. If you have something that's thicker, if it warps too much, it is a little bit hard to use on pages, so you have to be careful of that. That's why I always leave all the pieces in the molds for as long as possible till they look like they're absolutely dry. Sometimes they're even popping out, because I just want to make sure that that they're as straight and flat as possible. So I will store those, like I said, as is in a storage container. You can see that this one has a lot of the bigger ones in it. I also have a smaller container where I keep a lot of the smaller size pieces. So this comes in handy when I think of something I want to use. I find the image, I take it out, and I paint it to match my page. So that's my method of doing that. Today I'm going to paint a couple of pieces for you. I'm going to paint a seahorse, a rose, and a sand dollar. And I'm going to be using these Prima paints. They're metallic paints. And then I also have some of the Opal Magic paints. And I'll tell you what colors I use as I go along. I'm going to start with the seahorse. So for the seahorse, I'm just going to use one color. I'm going to use this Opal Magic in, it's called Teal Pink. And These are such nice paints. They were on sale, 75% off at Michael's about a year ago, and I bought a bunch of them. I really wish I had bought more. I use them constantly. They have a nice shiny finish to them that really make these clay pieces stand out. Let me move these out off of here for right now, just so I don't get this color on those. And one of the most important things when you're painting these is to make sure you get the sides. That's probably the main reason I have to repaint them. The sides can sometimes be a little tricky, but if you just move it around and around and keep applying the paint, I usually get all of them. Sometimes I pick them up. You just run the risk of transferring the paint to your fingers from the piece that you're painting, so you just have to be careful of handling them too much. But anyway, that should be fine. That's the Seahorse. I got the sides. I'm just going to add a little bit more color to the top. Okay. And normally when I paint, I like to use different colors, but when I use the waxes later, that will provide some nice variation so it doesn't just look solid. So that's that simple. The next thing I'm going to be painting is this rose. I put out a few colors. The metallic Prima paints are the Royal Red and also the White Pearl. And this one is Vintage Rose. And then I also use an Opal Magic. This one is called Coral Green. So these are the colors I'm going to be using. Now, looking at flowers, usually the center is much darker than the rest of the flower. So I go from dark to light because the petals spread out as you go along. And I just try to blend one color into the next. So I'm really basically just going from dark to light. And again, don't forget to get the sides when you paint these. Now I want to probably add a little bit more in the center to make it a little bit darker. But I also don't want this abrupt switch from that to that, from the two different pink colors to each other. So I'm just going to keep spreading it out a little bit. And then when you get to these outer petals, they're usually pretty light. And we're going to lighten them up even a little bit more when we go in there with our waxes. But I do want the center to be dark. And I just play around till it looks blended to me. There's no science to it. I actually find painting very relaxing and fun. So my whole idea is just to go from dark to light. And again, like I said, make sure that I get all the sides. Oopsie. Okay. Okay, so that's going to be my rose. And then for the sand dollar, I'm just going to mainly paint it this pearl color. then the final step, they really come to life with the waxes, which will be the next thing that I'm going to show you. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry these with my heat tool. And when I'm done drying them with my heat tool, I'm going to come back and show you how I add waxes. Now the paint is perfectly dry, and now I'm going to be adding some waxes. So the wax that I use the most is this brand Deco Art Metallic Luster. This color is White Frost, but it's available in lots of other colors. And I also have these Prima Art Alchemy waxes, and I like these as well. I'm just going to open one up so you can see what they look like. You have to be really careful with these that you put the cover on really tight or they dry out. So you have to be careful. Okay, so I'm going to use the White Frost on the Seahorse. And I'm going to do it. I hope you can see this. Let me just make sure that it is focused. Okay, so I'm just rubbing my finger into the wax, and then I'm just gently rubbing it. This way it'll just get onto the higher points on the piece of clay, and in that way it'll look like highlights. So you can add as little or as much as you want. And because this is a seahorse, and I like the metallic look of sea creatures, I'm going to be putting a decent amount on there. The paint is already metallic, and then this just adds, to me, this just adds another little nice dimension to the color. So there's my seahorse. That's all ready to go. I'm also going to use the White Frost on my flower. And I hope you could see before, when I was painting, I did add some white, but this just adds a little something that I don't think you could add with the paint. Again, I'm only just lightly rubbing it to whatever my finger meets. I'm not trying to get deep into the crevices because I want it to be highlighted. And I want the crevices to stay dark and the higher points to be light. And there I have my flower. And for the sand dollar, I was going to try the rose gold wax. So let's see how that goes. Now, let me just mention that I did not shut this well enough. These really have to be twisted shut to just make sure that they don't dry out. I'll use another finger for this one so that I don't mix them together. So you could see I have a little bit of the wax on my finger. And again, I'm just rubbing it on the higher points that my finger comes in contact with. And that's it. I don't think this one needs too much. That is my sand dollar. Those are all ready now to go on a scrapbook page. I thought I would end the video with just showing you a few layouts that I've made using these clay pieces. And I've shown all of these before. They're on my Instagram, but I just wanted to point out where I used the clay pieces. So you could see right over here, these are the clay pieces. And then also up here and over here. So, oh, I'm sorry, and these leaves as well. These right here, there's some here, and the flat leaves. These are all clay pieces. Now, I know a lot of people are worried about their pages getting thicker, and they do make your pages thicker for sure, but they always fit in a page protector. I've never made a page where it didn't fit into a page protector. So while they do make them thicker, and they do make your albums thicker, they do fit into page protectors. So as long as they're fitting into a page protector, I'm fine with that. And you could see that I did use the waxes on these as well. And I used those same paints that I showed you a few moments ago. On this layout, I used a lot of these Prima flowers, and then some of these are from those eBay molds that I got too. These are from a Prima mold, these big leaves, and I really went to town on this one. There's a lot of them on this one, and I think it really makes the page. I really love them. This is a layout that I'll be posting a process video for, and on this layout, these shells, there's the seahorse that I just made one that's very similar. slightly different color. There's a seahorse here. I'm sorry, not a seahorse. Starfish here and here. Another little seahorse, and this coral piece that is also clay. So making sure that that's focused so you could see that. And then up here, there are some shells, and there's a shell and there is a starfish. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this video inspired you to want to try using molds and modeling material to make some embellishments for your scrapbooking layouts. I use a lot of flowers and leaves on my layouts, so the first molds that I bought were flowers and leaves, and then I expanded from there. Whatever it is that you use on your layouts, there's a mold for it, I'm sure. So my advice would be to look for those molds first, and then if you enjoy using them, then you can pick up more molds as you go along. Initially, the investment is not that big. You can get a mold from between $2 and $20, and you can get the clay. If you get a coupon, you can get the clay for about $7 or $8, or even if it's not on sale, it costs about $14 or $15. And you can make a lot of embellishments just from one mold and one package of clay. So again, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great day. If you like this video, if you stuck out to the end, I hope you'll give me a thumbs up. And thank you to my current subscribers. And if you're not subscribed, I hope that you'll consider subscribing to my channel. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.